Okay.
Yes, whenever you're ready.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I meant I'm ready. Are we live?
Yeah.
We are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God. Sorry. Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Recreation and Amenities Committee of Henley Town Council. Today, Tuesday, the 19th of January. The first item on the agenda this evening is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence this evening? I believe there was one from Councillor Paula Isaac. And we don't have anybody substituting, and everybody else seems to be here. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member have an interest to declare of a pecuniary nature? I see none, so we move on to public participation. I'm seeing nobody here, but Town Clerk, have we had anyone request to speak during public participation this evening?
No, I haven't received any requests. I don't know if the estate manager has at all.
No, I haven't.
Okay, so we will move on to agenda item 4, approving the minutes. The first minutes to approve are the minutes of the Recreation and Amenities Committee meeting held on the 1st of December 2020. Is that a proposal, Councillor Plant? Thank you. All of those in favour? Thank you, Councillor Clark. Carried. And to receive and note the minutes of the Putting Green Working Group meeting held on the 17th of December. So those are noted, I'm sure. We now move on to the progress report, which you will find on pages 11 and 12 of your agenda. As usual, I'll go through these one by one, and if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand and we can stop and discuss the item. The first 2 items on the progress report are agenda items, so I will move past those. Donation of a Slovenian hay rack. You can see there's a draft agreement there. Riverbank repairs due to come back. Provision of toilets at Makins Recreation Ground is obviously still on hold, as we're in a even deeper lockdown than we were the last time this was discussed. Park services update. Sorry, Councillor Clark.
Yeah, we've had a referendum on the Makins Recreation toilets, and it's been voted against. So I might have that withdrawn from the members meeting, please.
So what we actually decided at the last, it wasn't the last meeting, it was some meetings ago, is that we would have a public consultation at a time when we could hold a worthy consultation, which obviously isn't in the middle of a lockdown. So we've agreed to keep it there until we can consult properly. We did consult before, you're right, but it was felt that there wasn't enough representation from people in the town. So we do need to go out to consultation again, really, to be fair to everybody. Okay. Is that okay? All right, thanks, Councillor Clark. Moving on to the park services update. Councillor Arlett, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, did we manage to find the missing piece of lawn that was taken?
I actually haven't asked for an update. Parks Manager, Carl.
No, unfortunately not. Yeah, we're a couple of roles missing, so if anybody's got some spare, we'd take them gratefully.
Thank you for that. Moving swiftly on to the Henley Litter Challenge. You can see an update there for it to be transferred to Henley and Bloom. You can also see an update underneath that for the signage working group, and there is a signage item obviously on the agenda this evening. Turning over to page 12, we have the Lido working group. Project is on hold for obvious reasons. Paving around the Lightlingham Pavilion. This is due to come off the progress report now that the project is complete. And we spoke about that last time. The welcome wall, obviously see the agenda item on Mill Meadows signage. And there's an update there on cycling at Mill and Marsh Meadows. That is the progress report. If there are no further questions, we can move on to the budget. Okay, so to receive and consider and note the management accounts for December 2020. You can see the normal sort of dashboard there. We interestingly had a better November and December this year than the 2 years prior on both moorings and car parking. So it's always nice to have bit of good news. We need the money. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Arlett.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask one on the temporary moorings. Why we seem to be so far down in July. I don't know if anybody's got the information. When you see how strong it was in August and not too bad in September, but July does seem rather low. I wonder if there's any reason why.
School's not broken up, maybe.
I don't, off the top of my head, I can't remember a specific reason. For instance, we didn't flood or anything like that in July, which we have in July's years gone by. I'm not sure what the lockdown situation was then, or rules around holiday boats. I don't know, but we could look into it, couldn't we? And
Well, it'd just be interesting.
Got his hand up.
Carl, have you got an answer?
Sorry, one of the reasons it could have been was the fact that all through the summer we've been any cash that was taken was quarantined, so and that may not have got handed in exactly 2 weeks after it was taken. So that could be there could be a reason why it didn't all come in at one point.
Yeah, it could have created a delay in the charts. That makes sense. Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, and also remember we lost the regatta in the festival in July. Big
Yeah,
one.
that would have had a significant
That would have had a
impact.
big
Were you
result.
about to say that, Councillor Plant? Did you have your hand up? Yeah.
That's just exactly that. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments, or should we move on to agenda item 7? I see none, so we will move on to Adventure Golf at Mill Meadows. A number of you are on the working group, and actually there, Councillor Gavashak, who's been chairing this group, isn't on this committee, but you can see there's a full report from the town clerk with a number of options. Under 3.8, you can see the other uses that can be considered, and there is a recommendation on page 19, 4.1. Are there any questions about the report? Any comments? Who wants to start? Councillor Plant.
I think it's great. Very thorough kind of report on it. I think it's brilliant that, we've spoken about it for a while now, but, some real proactive work has been done on it, and it looks like 35% return on investment, potentially more, potentially less. It is great. It's exactly what the council's been talking about, creating some more revenue generating ideas, and I think it's a wonderful use of our space, as it were. So yeah, great work.
Absolutely.
I agree. Are there any other comments or questions from anybody? Councillor Eggleton.
No, I'm like I'm behind this on things, but one question I'd like to know is just to get someone to ask the places that have already been established by companies and just trying to work out the revenue. So we have got on a 9 and on an 18, and to see what their revenue is. Obviously it's going to be a bit different because of this COVID, but their previous records, just going forward, I don't think it's going to hinder it, but it'd be nice to know how popular it is and what their income is, so we know. Then we can work that on the expenditure and how quick we would get our return back, and then going forward.
How is that information
Town
different?
clerk. I think you were going to point out 2.8, I think, but Lawrence.
Thank you very
Councillor
much.
Francis.
Thank you. It's a good point that Councillor Eggleton raises. We have put in a number of requests. I'm still waiting on 6 other local authority adventure golf providers to come back to me with details of their income and costs. And there aren't many 9-hole courses around, but it would be a very interesting comparison to see what the relative income is for a 9-hole versus an 18-hole. So we are waiting on those to come back in, and I'll continue to chase those, or failing that, have to put in an FOI, which I'd rather not do. But yes, certainly I will chase that up.
Thank you.
Yes, there are costs under 2.8, which is on page 16. I think it is. The top of my page is taken off, but they're just for the 18 holes. And Councillor Eggleton wanted to know about the 9-hole courses as well. I anything. Councillor Arlott, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Chairman. I was more concerned in 3.13, increased staffing and the cost for this and exactly how it is going to run. It's fine having the figures of possible income, but I'd like for full council, if we can, some more detailed figures on expenditure. You know, how many hours are we going to open this a day? What staff are we going to use? Are we going to just get some ad hoc staffing from somewhere? Are we using the Parks Department? Exactly how it is going to be costed out? Because the last thing we want to see is a lot of expenditure on staffing and very little income. So if we could have some more detail for full council.
I'm really glad you asked that, Councillor Arlott, because one of my concerns is that it might get absorbed into the park's workload. So I wanted to make sure that was clear. That wasn't going to be the case, you know. But I did also raise this with Councillor Eggleton as well, because I know he's been working on this, and he did mention volunteers. Can you elaborate on that, Councillor Eggleton?
Yeah, initially I thought that it could be, I'm sure there's going to be some volunteers to get involved in it. And I think we could probably do that research now. It's getting volunteers involved in doing the Patting Green, how long we work. And that's also the information that we could gather when we're speaking to them to find out the revenue, see how long they're open for and everything else. Bearing in mind, this is not just going to be about the Patting Green. There's going to be a little cubicle in there, or that's what was talked about, having and promoting the town from the river, like a tourist information side of it. But it was volunteers, worked on volunteers, which is the first and foremost, to try and do that. And obviously, when we've got our revenue back, what the outgoings on the what we've actually spent out, then we could then look at the money that's coming back in, other than putting some of the money to one side for maintenance, then look at the figures behind that to see if we could then employ a full-time person. So the running cost of it, and once the money's paid back, the running cost would then, this is in my point of view, the running cost would then be you'd be to have enough money to actually pay someone to run the thing, and not running on volunteer services.
Thank you for explaining that. Councillor Crook.
I'm not sure if I remember, forgive me if I'm completely wrong, but Sheridan might know, but Stefan's the best person to ask. Did we discuss volunteers, Sheridan? Or, because I'm sure we were on about employing some, actually employing some, because you haven't been to the last meeting, Dave, have you?
No.
No, I think we have discussed staff. Yeah. But
perhaps I can move on to Sheridan, our town clerk, to clarify on that, if that's okay.
Thank you. We hadn't discussed volunteers. However, that doesn't mean that it's not a viable idea. It may be the sort of thing where volunteer support could be very helpful. With some of the existing sites, they've reported that they've been able to do it with their existing staff. So where there have been existing staff looking after nearby facilities, then they've been able to split their time. However, with our circumstances, that's probably unlikely. So we would be looking at at one member of staff to man it during its opening hours. It would depend on its opening hours as to the costs for that. However, if we're looking at 7 days a week for the vast majority of the year, then we can certainly do some calculations based on that. Obviously, the staffing costs would be commensurate with the income as well. So the higher the staffing cost, then the higher the income. So we'd probably be looking at it as a proportion of the income. But another advantage of it is that we could potentially use the kiosk down there as a satellite information centre, which I'm aware that some councillors would like to see back down at Mill Meadows again, and therefore you could have two functions for the price of one, if you like.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wonder, is it be a green grass or 3G material being used?
Green grass.
So the difference, so yeah, adventure golf is a lot more natural than say crazy golf, but the specifications and the recommendations will be down to the putting group. So tonight, or we can put forward suggestions, things for them to consider. Certainly tonight we're voting through the expenditure rather than getting into the nitty-gritty of the details, so to speak.
I was just wondering what is going to be more expensive, the grass or the materials?
It's going to be grass.
Okay, Town Clerk, if you could answer that, that'd be great.
Yes, Madam Chair is correct that we would that the specification would be dependent on the tenders that we get back in. The meeting here is to recommend that earmark funds be put aside. So it's we're not looking at getting approval for the spend now. It would be a two-part process. We'd be looking for the full council to put the money aside. Basically, so we have in principle agreements, and then we would have some small costs when we're looking at getting the designs done, and then when the designs are done, we have an operating model as well. Then we can come back to the council potentially for funding of the build.
Thank you for explaining that. Are there any other questions on this? Councillor Plant.
Can you use SIL money to pay for a golf course? Surely it's community infrastructure.
Models.
I don't know. I don't know which one of us could answer that more. I don't think it's me. Possibly Mr. Mayor.
We probably could, but I don't think we've got that kind of money in seal, unless you want to build another 500 houses.
We could use a chunk. I was just saying.
There was one query I had. I may have missed it in the report, and obviously I haven't been on the working group. I just wondered on here we're looking at 18 holes, but for a 9-hole or 18-hole, what would be the sort of maximum usage on that course at any one time? Are we looking at, because I noted there was a comment about parking, and I thought, would it really have a significant impact? Because if you had, as you say here, encouraging use of different transport links, also, what was the capacity? I mean, even in a non-COVID world, surely you wouldn't have a family on every single hole in the course at the same time. Town Clerk.
That's a very good question. So if we're looking at income of between 100 to 200,000 a year, and the price was, say there was a price point between £5 to £7 or £8 per person, then we could work the maths back, and you can see that it is a lot of people per year. So, and it would be, we would anticipate it would be a major attraction, attracting people to it. And we know that the car park is very full in the summer. So, so yes, with the capacity on the holes, you can have more. The idea with an 18-hole is that you can have almost two 9-hole courses, which means that you can have more people playing at the same time. How many people you would have on each of the courses, I couldn't tell you at this point. What we would be looking at when we appoint a contractor, at least for the design phase, is all the contractors have experience of operating adventure golf courses as well, and they would be able to give us the advice on the correct operating model for Mill Meadows.
Brilliant, thank you. Great, well, I don't have any further questions. Is there a proposal from anybody I can see? Councillor Plant.
Go for the recommendation.
Yep. Go for the recommendation in 4.1. I would be happy to second that. I can see there's Councillor Egerton seconding that. So all of those in favour of the recommendation 4.1 as laid out on page 19 of the agenda. Thank you very much. That's voted through. There wasn't anybody against, was there? No, I think it was unanimous.
Glenn, I don't know whether Glenn did.
And Glenn didn't move his hand.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Councillor Lambert. Anyone against? Anyone? You're against? Okay. Thank you.
Is that because you want a windmill, Glenn? I'm disappointed that 250,000 doesn't buy you a windmill. I was sure you got a windmill.
I think that the income projections are way over the top, and I think we will lose a lot of money. But I realise that I'm in a minority of one.
Fair enough. And on that note, we will move on to Freeman's Meadow. We've already announced, obviously, that it's been registered as a town green. You can see it's not the easiest thing to read, or it wasn't for me. I reprinted my agenda from pages, I think it's 21 to 25. All of that detail. So we'll note that and move on to agenda item 9, which is columbarium charges. I'm going to now just pass over to Liz Jones, our accountant, who has prepared the report on page 27, and see if there's anything you'd like to add, Liz.
Thank you. So this is really this meeting, the Recreation and Amenities Committee's big chance to decide on how the columbarium really is run in terms of the leases for the niches. So I think hopefully you've all looked at the report, and you can see the kind of the idea that we have these wooden cabinets with niches in. They're going in next week. Actually, we're as close as that. This week the floor is being cleaned and polished, ready, and then the cabinetry is all going in next week. We've had more work than we expected on the roof and the plaster works and whatnot. That's all done now. The guttering and all the drainage is all sorted, so we shouldn't have any damp problems. So now we're very close to the woodwork going in, and then we hope to have the columbarium sort of handed over to us by the contractors in the first couple of weeks of February, which means we can start to rent out the niches sort of from about the middle of February. So this is kind of the opportunity now to make decisions on how long the leases are going to be for and what we charge for them. Myself and a couple of other staff have done a lot of sort of research into what other columbaria is the plural, charge, and how they do the management of the niche of their columbaria. There is nothing, it has to be said, that's exactly like this. Lots of columbaria are literally columns that are outdoors that have little drawers in them, and you pop your ashes in and they get sealed up and a little name put on the outside. In Catholic churches, it's more common to have vaults with niches in, and occasionally there are a few private columbaria around the country that charge an awful lot of money to have your ashes installed in things that look a bit like Teletubby houses that are sort of built into the ground. They're sort of almost underground rooms, but they're very beautiful, and there's lovely, kind of a nice ambience inside of the buildings that's calm and peaceful and a place of reflection. So this is what we're kind of trying to get close to with our own columbaria, as a sort of quiet place of contemplation, and we sort of feel that the charge should reflect the provision of that. You're indoors, out of the rain and howling winds. You can see the urn with the ashes in. It's going to be a very personal and quite an emotional little place to be in, I think, if you're there to sort of remember your loved ones. So looking at the types, I mean, I've done a bit of information. There's a bit of information on what other places charge. I've put some information in here on what we charge at the cemetery. Obviously, we don't want to sort of compete with ourselves as far as burials at the cemetery is concerned. So we're actually aiming for a slightly higher charge for this, so that people don't think, oh, I'll go to the columbarium instead of having my loved ones put in the ground in our cemetery. And I've also kind of taken into account the cost of running the columbarium, which will depend on how many niches we lease out. There will be a staff involvement in every kind of sale that we make, if you like, every lease agreement that we have. And if it proves popular, it may be more cost effective to have a part-time cemetery warden, say, sort of looking after it. There are 220 niches, so even if we only lease out 10 a year, that's 22 years worth of niches that we've got there, and we can install further niches in the center of the space if it's going very well and we want to increase. So my proposal is that we pitch the niches for the, so there are 4 different sizes that we're going to have installed. There are sort of small ones and normal single ones, and then there are sort of larger ones and family ones. And I'm suggesting that the sort of, for the 2 smaller sizes, we charge £1,300 per niche, and £1,800 for the larger ones. But we do have to give some of that money to the tax man, to the VAT man, because we've opted to tax the building. So income that we generate from it has to be subject to VAT. So if we charge somebody £1,300, the net of VAT that we receive is £1,083. So that compares with a cost for a normal, for a burial of ashes in our main cemetery is about £825. So it is a bit more if you're the person who's doing the paying. So those figures are at 3.6, and unfortunately in the recommendation I didn't adjust my figures in the recommendation, but I did send round a sheet with the correct figures in, which hopefully you all got just after the agenda went out. What I didn't also address in the report is the fact that at the cemetery at the moment, if you are a non-resident of Henley, then the charges for being buried are either double or triple, and I would anticipate that we would do the same for this. The reason for that, I'm sure you all realise, is that if you're a resident of Henley, you're kind of paying to help the upkeep of the cemetery through your council tax anyway, because keeping a cemetery costs money. And so I would anticipate that non-residents of Henley who choose to be buried here because it's a very lovely place should pay the extra on the sliding scale, same type of sliding scale, which makes it expensive if it's triple. But as I say, it's a lovely place. It needs maintaining. You're there for 25 years. So it's a one-off cost for the whole 25 years. So I don't feel that what I'm proposing is too outrageous. It's, you know, it's my suggestion, but it's open to debate. So the main suggestions are that the lease is for 25 years. That is the most common that there is amongst all the ones we did research for. Some are less, some are more, some are give a choice, but my recommendation would be 25 years. The charges of £1,300 and £1,800 for the smaller and the larger, and that the final terms and wording of the lease agreements, which we'll probably need to just whiz past a solicitor at some point, are given to the town clerk as delegated powers just to finalise the terms of the lease. So, yeah, questions?
Thank you for that, Liz. Councillor Plant, you had your hand up, and then I'll come to Councillor Eggleton.
Oh, I was just going off the income, as it were. So I was just looking, it's like, if we were to lease out all 220,
yeah,
it would only be, well, all 220 for 25 years, it would only be about 11.5 grand a year total income.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But we'd like to hope, I hope that we get shot of them, well, fill them, I should say, in less than 22 years or 25 years. And then at the end of the 25 years, we contact the family and say, do you want the ashes back, or do you want to take it for another 25 years or whatever? So.
Brilliant. Councillor Eggleton.
Answered my question, because I was going to say, what happens to the ashes after 25 years? Or if in some cases, if it's done on a 25-year base, can they book it for 50 years in the pre-booking, or do they have to wait until the 25 years up before they redo it?
They'd be given the choice at the end of the 25 years to remain there. So I would recommend 25 years only, not the option of 50 years, but in 25 years' time, they would get you know, that we wouldn't move the ashes, but they would just pay again at whatever the rate is in 25 years' time.
Okay.
Thank you for answering that. Councillor Miller, then Councillor Hooper, and then Councillor Clark.
Yes, two things. Firstly, yeah, thank you, Liz. A really clear and concise report once again from you. So thank you very much. I might be a bit of a duffer here, but what happens if you've paid your 25 years, all of your family go away or they all die, and your 25 years are up and you're in there, you're obviously dead, ashes in the niche. What happens to the ashes? What happens if there's no one that can cover another 25 years or?
Well, we would, if we can contact the family, then we'd discuss with the family what the options are, and they may choose to move them to somewhere else or bury them in our cemetery. I mean, it would depend on the family. In the hopefully very unlikely event that we can't contact the family, but we will, you know, we will endeavour to sort of keep in touch every now and then and say, just don't forget, you know, to let us know if you've moved away or if you've changed your contact details. But if we can't get hold of the family, it is allowed to scatter ashes, and we would do that. We'd remove the urn and scatter the ashes respectfully somewhere, perhaps at the end of the cemetery, or, you know, we'd make a decision on that. We're allowed to do that. They can be scattered. So,
it's just something that, you never know. I mean, it's very unlikely, but you just don't know, do you? These things.
No, you don't know. No, it happens. I realise it happens, which, you know, But the cemetery, the data software that Lena's putting all our information onto will also cover the columbarium, and it will have everybody's contact details in there. You know, we do need to, from time to time, just get in touch and make sure we've still got the right details.
Okay.
So
I'm sure it's in the report, but do we have an sort of an idea of when it's going to be open, when it's going to be all systems go?
Well, all systems go sort of mid-February. We've been told will be our handover date. The only thing that there's a slight delay on is that some of the hanging down internal lights. There will be lighting within the church, but in the chapel, but the hanging down lights are stuck in Europe because of Brexit. So they might be subject to a week or two's delay. I mean, they are trying to get them over, and they may arrive in time, but there's just a possibility it'll be a week or two later. So I would say it would be good if we could be doing a PR campaign sort of late February.
Okay, thanks, Liz. Thank you.
And I've already contacted the local funeral directors, explained, you know, all about it, and said, you know, in an ideal world we would show them round and, you know, get them involved and all the rest of it. They're all, you know, fine with that, but obviously they can't go around it at the moment.
Perhaps we could, with now that we have a communications manager and everything, we might be able to do a little video to put on our website or something for people to be able to, or just to send directly.
That's what the aim is, actually, to do a little virtual reality, or to, you know, to do an actual video, and then they can show people who might come through their doors and be interested in it, and for our own website, and the local press and so on.
Okay, Councillor Hooper and Councillor Clark, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Eggleton.
I think basically my questions have been answered, because I was wondering what would happen if the family is no longer in existence. So, you know, you cannot find them, what's going to happen. But if the ashes are going to be disposed by, i.e. the council, I'm pretty sure, don't you have to have a priest involved in that?
Well, the whole of the ground at the cemetery is consecrated.
Yeah, I know, but you are literally moving a person's, whatever you want to say, the ashes somewhere else, completely from where it originally was.
I will double check, but my understanding, I spoke to the somebody at the ICCM, Cemetery Management Institute, or whatever it is, and we've talked to a couple of local church, you know, religious people who run churches, what they would do. So it is my understanding that as long as it's on our own land.
Yeah, I know at the crematorium, if you want to do that, you have, if you want to just spread your ashes, you have to have somebody from the crematorium, like a lay preacher or something?
Yes, I mean, that probably is because the family is wanting to scatter the ashes on land that's not their own. Because this is our own land, we haven't got to ask permission to put it there, to scatter there. So it's my understanding that it can be done without a preacher, but I will double check that.
It's a very grey area, I think you'll find anyway. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've got 25 years to find out the answer.
Yes, we have.
Councillor Clark.
You might have.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
You might have, yeah.
John, I wouldn't worry about it.
Yes, Liz, if you want to get access to the chapel, would everybody have the same code number to access the chapel?
Everybody will have their own fob, an individual one, so only they can get in it and use the fob.
It's in the report, Ian, if you read it.
Yeah, I have read it, but I just wondered if it was all going to be the same for everybody.
No, it's not one that loads of different people can use. Each one is different.
Okay.
Oh, so you have a log of who goes in when?
Yes, and we can trace, who does go in. Yeah, just in case there's any mess left behind or anything like that, we can say.
Councillor Eggleton, you had your hand up, and I believe then Mr. Mayor did also. So.
Yeah, it was just going on what Sarah said. Is there any way that we could incorporate that when someone's obviously wants to put someone into there, just putting it in there? If there was any circumstances that arise, then we couldn't get hold of you for a number of months or whatever. Would it be possible? Where would you like the ashes scattered? Would it be okay to scatter the ashes in our in the graveyard? Would that be that?
That could be
not
put
be
into
added
the
in?
lease agreement. We could get people to sign that. Yeah, that's a very good idea. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Could I just say the first thing? The item on the recommendation resolves. Could we change that to resolve to recommend? And I'll tell you why. I didn't pick up your other paper, Liz. My fault, obviously. And I worked the figures out of the recommendation, and to be honest, it doesn't show a really good return. I don't think anyway, on the amount of money that we've invested there. Obviously, with 1,300 and 1,800 makes a wee bit different, but even 1,300, only works out at about £54 a year over 25 years. And I, for one, would cut the 25 down to 20. Straight away. I think 20 is plenty enough time to have your ashes in one of these niches. And I'd like to look at the figures again. They look fine until you take the VAT off. And I wouldn't want to resolve anything this evening, which we might need to take a 5-member motion at a later time to change. So I propose that we change the recommendation to resolve to recommend. And I would, at this moment in time, my proposal would be for 20 years, and it would be obviously for the £1,300, if that's what you think is the best that we would get for a single, and 1,800 for a double. But until we let all the 220 boxes out, we won't be making that profit. It's only when we've let the 220 niches out that we start making the money, because we've still got the overheads year on year, and the overheads will go up year on year as well with salaries. So that might be another thing we need to look at. We do it for 20 years, but then have a look at it again in 5 years' time. But I think just to stick what I've got in front of me, is nothing I would support.
Can I go back on? Is it all right to respond?
Okay. Yes, sorry, carry on this.
With the sliding scale, if we had non-residents, in the main cemetery, I've looked back for 2 or 3 years just to see what proportion of burials are non-resident burials, and therefore at the enhanced rate. And for the last 2 or 3 years, it's been exactly, funnily enough, 25%, exactly a quarter of them. So I did some calculations, and if a quarter of the niches were leased out at 3 times. So the same proportion, it would add 120,000 over the 25 years to the whole thing. It does make quite a difference because, you know, that is 3 times what we would charge to residents. And that kind of helps the whole payback really on the investment that we've made. But you know, it is the council's decision, you know, on what we charge out.
Could I just come back, Chairman?
Yes, of course,
Yeah,
Mr. Mayor.
I think with that, that's another item that obviously needs to be in the final recommendation about anybody that doesn't live in Henley.
Yeah,
I think that should be in there as well. And then, you know, I'd like to work the figures around what you're then proposing to see what it comes back with. But that would be my only problem. If they are as they are, you know, the overheads, if we're not careful, will soon overtake the income. And when you look at the capital that we put into this project, I think we need to show a bit more profit.
So if I may be clear, just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, you would resolve to recommend, your proposal is to resolve to recommend and go with the recommendation as laid out in 4.1, but change 25 to 20 years, and to add a D, which is obviously the triple pricing for those living outside of Henley. So that's a proposal. Are you seconding that, Councillor Eggleton?
Sorry, and the other figure. Sorry, the other figures would be changed on the recommendation as well. That's in front of us. To 1,200 to 13 and 1,500 to 18. They would be changed as well.
They've already been
yes,
updated.
That's great. Yeah, they have been updated in a subsequent paper. So you were seconding that, Councillor Eggleton, did you say?
Yes, I was, and I just wanted to speak on it as well. I understand where the mayor's coming from, but also it is a listed building, and we have got duty of care to uphold and do our buildings up. So we can't take all the money into that. I know we need to get some money back and the running costs, and but we have got duty of care to look after our historic buildings. So we can't take all the money that is cost into doing that. If it would have been maintained over the years, then it wouldn't have cost as much as it did. But I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we have a proposal that's been seconded. Did you want to speak to this, Councillor Plant?
I was just going to say, off the initial point of the turnover, and echoing Ken's point, I still can't help but feel even at that amount per annum, once fully let, it's going to come anywhere near. And I do understand Dave's point, but this is why historic buildings get let go to rack and ruin, because we can't afford to maintain them. You know, it's a problem up and down the country unless we can create the profit to actually maintain them, and then they simply don't last for forever. So don't have a bottomless pit, and we need to make a way to pay for itself. And building on Ken's point, I don't actually know if you look at a sliding scale where if you only want to pay for 5 years, it costs you the highest amount per annum, and then the more years you buy, it comes down per annum, and then at least you encourage a longer term. But I still think even at 20 years, we're not going to come close.
Okay, is there anybody else that would like to speak to this before we go to the vote on the proposal in front of us? I see none. So if we vote, I'll just go over it one more time. This is resolving to recommend to full council that we approve the lease term for a niche to be 20 years, that we approve the charge for a single lease at 1,300 and a larger niche at 1,800, both including VAT. That we give delegated powers to the town clerk to determine the final wording for the terms and conditions for inclusion in the cemetery rules and regulations, and adding additional point D, the triple charging for those that wish to buy if they live outside of Henley. All of those in favour? Any against? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. That is carried. So we move on. Thank you, everybody, for that debate there and all the information, additional information. Thank you, Liz, and thank you for attending. We now move on to agenda item 10, plaque at the Chantry House. This is on page 33 to 35 of your agenda. You can see a report. You can also see a mock-up of the sign. and you can see a recommendation in 4.1. Would anybody like to speak to this? Councillor Eggleton.
Yeah, this one you see in your pack at the moment, the one of the Chantry is not completely finished. It's got some recognitions for the use of pictures and things like that to go in it. So basically, it's not going to be changed very much. There's just a few extra things going to be added into it. I'd like to say a big thank you for Viv and persevering. I don't know how many this is now. I think it's got to be 4 or 5 or something like that. I'd like to ask, is it 6?
Yeah.
Is it 6? Yeah. We said we'd stop at 10. It all depends on whether we can get the more funding. I think these are, this one is basically replacing one which has already been down there, but with a lot more information. And I think it's good for our tourists and also for people that visit our town to see these. Every time I'm walking around by the river or Gainsborough, you see youngsters reading these plaques and some of the schools are using them for information. I think it's very important about promoting Henley and its history. So on that note, I'd like to say, if there is any chance, or putting it on the appropriate agenda for seeing if the council would fund another 3 plaques coming forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly support that. I'm not sure if that would be this committee. I'm not sure if it was this committee or finance before, but I'm sure that can be put on agenda. Would you like to make any proposal about?
I'd like to propose if someone seconds me for some funding to go in for another 3 plaques on the relevant committee.
I'm not sure. Can we vote that through now, Town Clerk? Can you give advice if we can do that? We've got the information of how much they cost here. Are we able to do that, or at least recommend that it go on a future committee for the next, because this is the last in the series, and Councillor Eggleton is talking about continuing on this project? You're on mute, sorry.
Thank you very much. Just to confirm, where is the cost for these coming from?
So this is the 6th in the series. Becky might be able to better explain than I can of how it came about, because I can't actually remember which committee it was.
Yeah, I'm just frantically looking in the report. I'm sure I put it in there, but I can't see it. So yeah. I think there is enough money for at least 2 or 3 more already, and it's in earmarked reserves.
I think it's an earmarked. I think it's capital expenditure that is coming from. So if it hasn't been allocated for the plaques yet, there's no reason why it couldn't be proposed, but it would need to go to it would need to go to Finance Strategy and Management probably before it could be approved.
Sorry, it's in 3.4 at the bottom. There is a brought forward accrual for 3 times 1,200 for additional plaques under CapEx, which was agreed on the 6th of December 2016. So we've still got.
So there is. So we have still got a couple. I thought this was the last in the series. That's my mistake.
Right. Yeah. So did I.
Just bear with me. Just bear with me 1 second. I just need to double check. If it is under 20,000 from an earmarked capital fund, which has been given to the committee to manage, which it looks like it is in this case, then in theory the committee could approve expenditure. I would just need to double check the wording of it, but it looks like the committee could probably approve it.
Shall we? What it might be better to do, if there are some left anyway, is maybe find out whether that's the case and then bring it back to the next meeting. If not, would that be okay, Councillor Eggleton?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So you've proposed the recommendation as in 4.1, which is obviously nothing to do with expenditure. This is already paid for. This is to approve the Chantry House as the subject of the 6th in the series of historic information boards in the town, and to give delegated power to the town clerk to approve the artwork subject to previous approval by the church. Would anyone like to second that? Are you seconding that, Councillor Miller? Thank you. Councillor Hooper, have you got a question, or were you seconding?
No, that's fine. No, I was just seconding.
Are there any other comments or questions before we move to a vote? I see none. Oh, sorry, Councillor Miller.
Well, I'm just going to say, I think these are great for the town. I think they're great, as Councillor Eggleton said, they're good for the tourists, good for the kids, they're informative. Three. I think that's great for Henley. So, absolutely.
Yeah, I completely agree. All of those in favour of 4.1. Thank you very much. We now move on to agenda item 11, which is signage at Mill Meadows. You'll see the report in front of you. This is something that has gone back and forth, been delayed for various reasons, from flooding to COVID to whatever. But here we are at the final hurdle, so to speak. You can see examples of the signage on page 39, and the end of the report there is a recommendation 4.1 on page 38. Are there any comments, questions about this? Councillor Plant.
Yeah, I hate to maybe ask an irrelevant question, but if we now go and potentially look at putting electric bays down there, do we then need to change the signage again?
Sorry, do you want me to respond?
Yes, please.
Sorry, on the signage, we're trying to be, what we're going to do is refer to signage at the electric charging point. Firstly, because we don't know how much it's going to, what the charge is going to be. And secondly, we're not sure what the conditions will be. And we will need some conditions so that we can give excess charge notices if they're abused. So in order to progress this project, we're going to refer to signage at the electric car parking points.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you for answering that, Becky. Councillor Eggleton.
Yeah, on the pay and display, and I understand with some of like parents' child space and all this, disabled and all that, they're all going to, in the town council signs, adventure playground. But is there anything on these signs that would change? Because obviously things change. So is there a way of going over with something, or having a slot? So if it changes prices or mooring prices or car parking prices, anything which is liable to change on a sign, is there a way that there could be a slot-in thing rather than just thing, or is it easy enough to take it out and replace it?
I'll let Becky answer that again. I know it was looked at the beginning.
So with the car parking signs, possibly quite a lot would change. And we do tend to have the regatta dates actually put on there. I mean, we did think about just saying regatta week and not having the dates, and we could still do that. But because the charges go up quite a lot, it's probably better to have the specific information. But in answer to your question, we'd probably have them re-wrapped with vinyl. What we want to try and get away, in the past we've used stickers to go over, but they just don't look as nice. So we would have them re-wrapped and hopefully only change the figures every couple of years. But I'm not sure about the regatta dates. We do need to look at that a bit more. We could put an additional sticker on there to highlight regatta when regatta is on. And then on the moorings, we were looking at having something that we can actually change to put on them at regatta time.
Thank you, Councillor Eggleton.
Yeah, it's I would say if it was, I think everybody knows regatta. I don't think you need to put dates down for regatta. It's well, in some aspects of it, some people wouldn't probably, they probably would need to know dates, I suppose. So that was the only thing that putting a stick or something, or making a slot thing so that those dates, because do they say the same dates every year? I don't think they do they?
No, it changes every year.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be correct the following year, would it, if you put dates on it?
No, it wouldn't. Well, I suppose you could put, is it the first Wednesday in July, isn't it? No, is it the last in June? I don't know. I can't remember. I finished doing this.
Usually the first week of July.
There we are.
Yeah. The first
there's our local river expert.
Regatta week. Put regatta week, because that's when
You could just put regatta week and then or just put it up, something up temporary during regatta week. I'm sure we can work out the details.
Be easier not to have the actual date.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or
No.
comment? I'm quite happy to propose from the chair that we go with the recommendation 4.1 on page 38. Am I second? Secondly, Councillor Plant. Thank you. All of those in favour? Thank you very much. That's carried, which takes us on to agenda item 12, which is CCTV at Makins Recreation Ground. So there is a report in front of you again, very detailed report, and you can see that there's a recommendation or 4.6 on page 44 of the agenda. I think the report details everything here. The recommendation is to install a standard 3-camera CCTV system at Brunner Hall. This is where obviously Headway are. Because of the improvements we have made to the park, this has obviously caused more foot traffic. And because of that, there's been an increased presence around Brunner Hall in particular, and there's been an impact on them. So this is a way forward to help try and resolve that problem. So the first part of the recommendation is to recommend to Finance Strategy and Management Committee that the cost is taken from the CapEx budget up to an amount of £1,500. There is a second part to this, but actually I personally believe that we should drop the second part to this. I don't believe it's worth monitoring the situation over the next 6 months when we're in the middle of a pandemic and everyone's behaviour is different. And also I believe that we have been monitoring this for a long time. We haven't felt a significant need to keep drawing down these costs without them being a real necessity. Is silly. We should not be drawing down from our CapEx budget at every opportunity. So personally, although I would like to see this come back if there's ever a need, I think that we could quite easily drop part B of the recommendation. Councillor Eggleton.
Just basically, I agree with what you were saying. I was going to say the similar sort of thing, because there isn't been any significant things to warrant having a camera, but having a camera on the building would be of great use, because as Scout have got one on their building, which is always constantly brought things to attention on that. Having it covered on the other aspect, there won't be no need for any other cameras in that area, I don't think.
Thank you. Councillor Crook did raise the question about the cost and value for money, and I know that our estates manager Becky sent some information through earlier that this, represented a good system and is a good price point. Councillor Plant.
I think we go for the recommendation. Happy to drop part B. I think it's good. We've debated CCTV a lot, pros and cons, and it does help with behaviour, etc. But I think adding it to the building and having the presence of CCTV already there, I think can only do good, and it looks like good value for money. So let's go ahead and do it and hope it has the desired effect.
Thank you. If you're dropping B, I'm happy to second that proposal. Would anyone like to speak to that? Councillor Eggleton.
No, I'm just going to second it. That's all.
Oh yeah, I'm happy for you to. Anyone else like to comment before we move to the vote? Anyone at all? Because otherwise Carl's going to win the bet. Anyone at all want to comment? Okay. All of those in favour of recommendation 4.6, just A and not B. That is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending this evening. Thank you to everybody that may be watching at home.